Mike McConville, String Tech Workstations, Stratford, Ontario, Canada. We have another vintage guitar rescue on the bench today. This is a Fender Mustang guitar that had a bunch of stuff done to it over the years. And I mean, really, realistically, in the 70s, that's what everybody was doing. They were chopping up their tellies and strats and all these vintage guitars. No one had any idea how much they would be worth at this point in time. You can see how thin that fingerboard is. The other thing about this era of vintage guitars, Strats and Tellys, Fenders, is the mating surface of the underside of the rosewood fingerboard and the actual neck surface. Both surfaces have that radius on it. It's like this paper thin veneer. Now this guitar, somebody had refretted it. They got the frets in really good. They did a good job putting the frets in, but there was virtually nothing left on the truss rod. So that truss rod was loosened right off to zero, and the neck was still going in a slight back bow. I took this neck off to check the truss rod, and sure enough, it was loosened right off. There was nothing on it. I didn't put load on the truss rod, but I turned it just enough so that it wouldn't rattle. It was refinished way back when and done in sort of a Gibson wine red color. The guy actually did a great job of the finish. Of course, this is something that you would never dream of doing now. If you had a guitar of this era with the original finish, you wouldn't touch it. The other thing I noticed is here, you see how the butt of the neck is actually exposed, because when they stripped the guitar down, they sanded so much of the cutaway off that they've sort of slightly exposed the underside of the butt end of the neck. It's all done now, water under the bridge. So my job is to get this thing playing 100%, and that's exactly what he did. Plays like a dream now. As often happens with these old vintage guitars that were sort of chopped up and people dropped their humbuckers and their vintage tellies and so on and so forth, some work was done expertly, some work was done not so expertly. This guy put a hardtail bridge on here, hardtail Strat bridge on this Mustang. The string spacing, as you can see right here, just barely makes it, because the Mustang bridge from the sixth string to first string was a little tighter spacing. The other thing is, if you look at that hardware swap out on that white Gibson Les Paul Custom, I do make a note in there that there is a difference between the neck pickup and the bridge pickup, and you can see here where the spacing runs right out. I mean, it still works, and the guy, I have to tell you, he did a great job way back then, but there were a couple of things. This cavity wasn't really routed out deep enough to sort of allow, I'd like to drop that pickup down a little bit. It's okay, it works just fine. Again, you start pulling it apart, and then you gotta router it even more. So I say leave it alone. I've got a self-adjusting radius gauge in there for jack, so that's that sort of lightly spring-loaded. It doesn't lift the strings up, but that gives us the perfect match from the bridge radius to the radius of the actual fingerboard. Of course, there's a compensated nut on this one, and that nut was compensated for the short 24-inch scale, 10 to 46 strings at concert pitch. Beautiful. It's a great little guitar, actually. For guys in my age group that are starting to have trouble kind of reaching for some of those chords, the short scale certainly makes it a lot easier to reach some of those crazy sort of jazz chords and stuff. The neck, as I mentioned earlier, had run out of adjustment, so I ended up just skimming the crowns of the frets, hitting all the high spots, because the guitar was virtually unplayable when I got it. Now, it plays like a dream. It's perfect all the way, end to end, perfectly in tune. Okay, here's the rundown on this little 66 Mustang. As far as intonation goes, we'll check the intonation first. So G, C, D, E, F, I've adjusted the values on that compensated nut for this shorter scale, 24-inch scale. So the guitar is perfectly in tune. Like I mentioned earlier, we'd run out of adjustment on the truss rod. The neck was going in a very slight back bow, but we managed to just skim off all the high spots. No buzzing. We'd go all the way up, every note, every string, every fret. Perfect. Anyway, it's kind of a cool little guitar. Back then, myself included, it was common to sort of route a telly and drop a humbucker in. Nobody would do that nowadays, but mainly because Fender make guitars with humbuckers. There's also a set of Shalers put on here. Kind of unnecessary, I think, but it's done. So what are you going to do? You're not going to pull them off at this point. This guitar is so far from original that the mission really was to make it 100% playable, perfectly in tune, and play smooth as silk. And that's what I've done. It's a nice little guitar. Actually, you know, even it's kind of a jazzy tone. I think Bill Frisell actually uses a shorter scale guitar. You know, he's not a big guy. He doesn't have big hands, right? He can make the reach for all those Tal Farlow chords that are next to impossible to play on a regular scale unless you're Tal Farlow. Anyways, there you go. 1966 Fender Mustang rides again.